and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation with a changemaker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable carbon-neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. In several of our recent interviews, we've looked at how industries such as fashion, beauty, and personal care manufacturers are working to become more sustainable. The underlying chemical science behind these and basically all other industries was transformed in 1998 by Yale University's Paul Anastas and John Warner's 12 Principles of Green Chemistry. Those ideas set the stage for rethinking the toxicity of chemical processes, lowering energy consumption, minimizing waste, which results in fewer leftover toxins after you're done manufacturing something, as well as designing materials to degrade without harmful impacts in the environment. Anastas, who is known as the father of green chemistry, recently published a new book with co-author Urvashi Bhatnagar of Yale University's Center for Business and the Environment. The Sustainabiity Scorecard, How to Implement and Profit from Unexpected Solutions, is a guide to recognizing and growing sustainable business ideas in a startup or at an existing company. We're joined today by Urvashi Bhatnagar, who, in addition to working with the Yale School of Management, is also a healthcare executive. After starting her career as a physical therapist at New Delhi's St. Stephen's Hospital, she studied for an MBA at Yale. Urvashi has designed and applied her ideas for sustainability in community healthcare programs and healthcare systems consulting projects. We'll include a link to purchase the book at Amazon or Powell Books in the article that accompanies this podcast. Welcome to the show, Urvashi. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, well, it's good to be talking to you today, especially because we caught you mid-move and you're calling from a hotel. We appreciate you taking the time. You know, I wanted to start off by talking about why you've decided to dedicate your career to this. The evidence is clear that we're about to pay the bill for 2 centuries of wasteful but unprecedented output and rising opportunity. What motivated you to dedicate your career to sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing is that I think healthcare has always been about impact.
Mm-hmm.
We may not have necessarily used the words ESG. We may not have, it may not appear to run the healthcare industry, may not appear to run the way the oil and gas industry runs. However, the inputs are all the same. Yet we are focused on impact. We're focused on improving well-being, putting quality of life back into our patients' lives.
Mm-hmm.
So very much the same drivers that motivated me to pursue healthcare as my career, the same ones that helped me sort of zoom out and look at, now the healthcare industry is finally waking up and we're discussing things like social determinants of health equity, data-driven approaches to all of these things. And I often say, well, we've missed out on the environmental determinants of health. Really, all of these things need to be viewed more broadly under the umbrella of sustainability. For hospital systems and payers, it shouldn't be something that's only evaluated by your procurement department. When you think about your next year's order of PP&E or med devices, right? That's a very siloed way of thinking about it. That's broadly how I got into it.
Well, it's about widening the aperture. And right. The book is clear that there's a lot more input and output than we ever acknowledged. It's not that that wasn't there before. It's just we were ignoring it. And you start the book with an observation that made me recognize how dire this is as a moment in history, but also full of potential for extraordinary change. You say, we've been doing things wrong for so long that our future is full of opportunity. So tell us about the vast amount of waste that you believe is the raw material for the next economy.
Oh my gosh. I mean, waste is going to be a huge opportunity. It already is a huge opportunity for the future economy. These days, I know we talk a lot about, the waste economy and sort of mining waste. At least I think about big concepts like e-waste. And those are sort of the tougher nuts to crack these days. Is what is the right answer? How do you develop a completely sustainable fuel cell? How do you develop a sustainable microchip? Those are difficult questions, but at least at this moment, what we can do is mine our e-waste, and we can start picking up those things. We can create a collection mechanism and put that back as an input. So yes, the opportunity is massive. But I think for the future, I think what we're going to go towards is waste prevention. And so
Mhm.
as we start incorporating the R&D insight, and start having less siloed systems, have more circular economy driven business models, I think we're going to move towards waste prevention, and a lot more consideration being given to product and process design in the design phase, where your budget is allocated, everything is allocated. That's where we're going to be spending most of our time.
So there's going to be a new sector of the economy that's built on using what we used to waste. Do you see that overtaking and obsoleting the existing economy, or does it become a complementary feature of the infrastructure of our economy? In other words, do we replace our old ways or do we augment them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of both, right? But I think what happens is that initially, I think we're going to start mining our waste. We're going to start utilizing this as another source of inputs. And then, as business models progress and as scientific input comes in, we're going to understand more and more. Are we truly replacing our waste with a new kind of waste? And it's entirely possible that we will, until we get it right. So I think there will be some kind of parallel tracking there, but eventually, hopefully, we get to the point where we have found those completely green alternatives in absolutely every industry. However, I think it should be recognized that in some cases, there are easily replaceable inputs that we can leverage today, and in other cases, we're really close to them. So I think we have a runway that is entirely within the realm of possibility to create these kind of transformations in businesses today. But we should recognize that there's a longer runway, which requires investment from not just VCs, but the largest corporations in the world, to actually to prevent the waste and not replace it with something that's unsustainable.
We'll talk a little more about that later in the conversation, but what I wanted to ask about now is the 4 principles for managing and scaling sustainability that you and Paul lay out in the book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, great segue. So the first principle that we talk about is waste prevention. And that's exactly, when you look at your product or process design life cycle, when you think about it, about 70% of your budget is allocated right in the design phase. And at that time, product designers think of everything. What are all the specs that are required in my product? What are the supply chain tweaks that are going to be required? What are the raw material inputs? What we say is that sustainability needs to be a design constraint within that. And so it shouldn't be another department. It should, and it shouldn't, and it's not bad if it is. That's great. However, in order to make sustainability something that permeates throughout the firm and something that really impacts product and process design and manufacturing, it really needs to be pushed into the initial part of that phase. So that's where we say, if sustainability is a design constraint, you're going to automatically focus on waste prevention.
Yeah.
And so that's where we encourage people to design out the waste and innovate out the waste, essentially. Then we advocate for the second principle, which is using renewable inputs. And hopefully you are able to use renewable inputs for absolutely everything. And if not, then, that's probably an improvement that can come in V2, V3, future versions. But we encourage people to make progress and don't let progress hinder perfection, or do not let perfection hinder progress, rather.
It's something we talk about a lot here, so we completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also talk about safe degradation. So when we are designing out waste, we might find that, we cannot avoid it. Certain components just end up in a landfill. And that's where we say, think about your material inputs and if they can be put in such a way that they degrade safely. And so what that means is that once the product meets its end of life, it's in a graveyard, a landfill, once it has spent considerable time there and decomposed, it doesn't go into our groundwater and release toxic chemicals the way e-waste does, for example. And then our last principle is maximizing efficiency and performance. And actually, I'm always most excited to speak about this one because it really talks about integrating or aligning your entire product development with the triple bottom line. To say that if you're trying to maximize performance, then you need to expand the definition of performance. Performance can't be just the ability to perform task A. Then it's just a metric of efficiency. And we're ignoring the other factors that enhance performance. For example, customer engagement and things like that. And that's where we get into the social and the environmental aspect of it, where we need to make sure that our product is socially responsible, is benign to the environment, either on decomposition or otherwise.
Now, that's the key. But then the problem is getting an organization to adopt the kinds of transparency and accountability, both internally within their own conversations and in their relationship with the rest of society. How do you get a company to start down that path? What do you, when someone comes to you and says, look, we'd love to be sustainable, but what does that mean? What do you tell them?
I think there's some initial work that's very important to be done on what is sustainability and what does that mean for the organization. And hopefully in time, everyone at the table will agree that the triple bottom line is what should be considered sustainability and not just one segment or factor that informs it.
Do you see that as being in line or out of line with Milton Friedman's argument that a company exists primarily to make profit and nothing else? Is it just a matter of expanding his definition of what profit means?
Absolutely. Milton Friedman had a very unilateral view or one-dimensional view of of economics and how business works. And one of the fundamental flaws in his assumptions was that our raw materials are going to exist forever. The fact that he didn't even mention business processes and how these firms run in his entire theory just demonstrates that he had just sort of taken it for granted.
So again, back to the conversation with an executive who probably was raised with that and went through business school hearing all about the fact that it was all about profit and nothing else. How do you get them to turn the corner?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think market leading firms have adopted this already. There are a number of firms that are doing a great job or they're trying to. There's no one that's perfect, partly because that's not possible at this time. So I would say that the writing is on the wall. And if I may be so blunt, I'd say that some firms may just become dinosaurs if they don't adopt this sooner rather than later.
Well, certainly that is the way history works. Dinosaurs do come and go.
However,
well, I think you also make a distinction in the book that's important to rethinking your framework for understanding this, and that is the difference between risk management and hazard management. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So a part of this is, opening up executives' eyes to, the new generation and the workforce that's coming in and things like that, and getting some line of sight into what your future business processes will be and whether your existing operations will support the future of the firm 50 to 100 years down the line. However, specifically getting into risks and hazards, I would say risks are important. Risks are what are tracked and measured by firms. They inform our compliance. We don't ever mean to say that risks are not important. It's important to track them. However, it must be acknowledged that climate change related economic shocks are probably no longer risks, and we are all experiencing them. And therefore now they are hazards. And therefore they require more strategic action, and they require a strategy to be developed either by way of embedding it in your corporate strategy or in just your business processes and how your day-to-day operations are transforming. But once this is not recognized as a risk, and a risk is by definition something that has the potential to occur, but a hazard is something that is occurring right now and requires to be mitigated or actioned upon in some form. I think that is the shift that's required. And I think that's what we need to open executives' eyes to, is the economic shock that their business processes are already facing.
Sustainability is longevity in a nutshell. And if you aren't looking to avoid the hazards which are real now rather than hypothetical, you're not making a good fiduciary decision for your company.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, this is a great conversation. I want to take just a quick commercial break so we can pay for the show. We'll be right back. We're back to continue talking with Urvashi Bhatnagar, co-author of the new book, The Sustainability Scorecard, How to Implement and Profit from Unexpected Solutions. One of the things I've learned about innovation over the years is that organizations don't make a lot of time for innovation. They sort of stumble into it. And you talk about a very structured initiate, develop it, and mature set of steps or stages in the evolution of a company. What's your practical advice for taking the time necessary to do that? And how do you tell leadership to put it to work in their organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. So innovation is steadily becoming more and more important. And that's where we say in any innovation occurring in the firm, sustainability needs to be a design constraint. Mm-hmm. And so when we evaluate firm maturity, almost like a maturity model, that's where we bring that model in to say you're either in the developed stage or onward.
So how do you know you've moved from initiate to develop, for instance? What would have changed in my organization were I a CEO and somebody came and gave me a report about the status of our sustainability innovation?
Yeah. Firms that are in the initiate phase are really early on. Mm-hmm. They may have adopted this, in their account. They may be evaluating this still as risks. They may have a sustainability department, but it's probably focused more on procurement or, single lines of business and things like that.
Or it might report up to marketing too.
Right, exactly. And so those are the kind of firms that we say have started their journey. They're at the initiate phase. Mm-hmm. Hopefully their boards are talking about this and they've started the conversation, but it hasn't trickled across the firm yet. They recognize that this is important. Firms that are in the developed phase, that's where we find the majority of our firms in the economy today. And it's really the widest bucket that you'll see. And with this design was intentional. You'll find maturity. We're such a framework-rich business economy these days. This is an intentional maturity model where the middle section is very wide-ranging because we want to give executives the perspective that there is no such thing as perfection. There will be ongoing improvement over time. And so it is good to be market leading, but being market leading cannot be your benchmark for whether am I sustainable or not, or is a certain process sustainable or not. Benchmarking against peers in this particular industry is not going to yield the optimal results the way perhaps an algorithm will.
You can fool yourself into thinking you're doing better than you are simply because you're doing better than somebody who's less perfect than you.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it by myself. That's perfect. So yes. And so hence in the develop phase, that's what we'll see, great top-down messaging. We'll see bottom-up action as well. We'll see firms that are trying to break down the silos between different departments. They are potentially transforming their supply chain inputs. The board probably has a sustainability report that they release every year. So they may be on various ends of this spectrum. But then once you get to the more mature phase, that's where we say, that's where you are intentionally investing in the future. So for example, if you're an electronics firm, you recognize that even if you upcycle and you create collection mechanisms and you mine your e-waste, at some point, things are going to end up in the landfill. They will not degrade safely because we just quite simply don't have a scalable scientific method for this yet. And therefore, we're creating intentional investments to figure out the answer. And we are working with our peers to do so.
And you referred to intentional investments, but one of the things you talk about throughout the book is unexpected solutions, which I think a lot of people would find counterintuitive because you, as you just described it, you intend to go innovate, right? But then how do you know you found an unexpected solution? Is it a matter of looking at the existing technology or whatever you're working on through a different lens? Again, going back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, it's partly about looking at it through a different lens, but that's not the complete answer.
Okay.
Because once you create a solution that is sustainable and I'll give the example of sort of either the healthcare industry, if you look at cleaning products, or if you look at cosmetics, because these are things that impact the human body every single day. These industries are looking for that next sustainable, the next it chemical every year, right? And so in these industries, when you're able to create a sustainable product, all of a sudden you notice, for example, we have two cases in the book that we use, one for Sustainable Earth, which is a cleaning product line, and then there's P2 Science, which is a cosmetics manufacturer, or rather a chemicals manufacturer that's supplying the cosmetics industry presently. But they have some really great products that actually do fulfill the 12 principles of green chemistry, and they actually do leverage our methodology as they scale. And they find increased market penetration. They find increased customer loyalty, and there are just so many benefits to their entire operating model. And the fact that they don't have to spend all this money on managing waste, they have entire sort of departments with less people and less business, less overhead, essentially. And so I would say that perception is important, and reframing issues is an incredibly important thing, and I don't want to diminish that. However, when you look at unexpected solutions, they actually provide benefits across your balance sheet, and not just along single line items.
So the other thing that I was thinking about as I was reading particularly this part of the book is that some issues seem to be too broad to be solved by one company. And so you talk about strange bedfellows, but it also seems like entire industries or multiple industries need to come together to address some of these things. Do we need to think about strange communities, unlikely assemblies of companies and individuals to recalibrate our world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's brilliant. Yes, in the book, we talk about peers coming together, but that would absolutely be a great way to collaborate outside of your industry and see if there are learnings and best practices that can be shared. And that's absolutely something that we would recommend.
It's interesting when you think about it. It also is reframing what the boundaries of your organization are entirely. If you're part of society, then you have a very fuzzy edge that flows everywhere. But if you're a Friedman-esque profit-only, damn the torpedoes company, you've got walls around you, and that's the way you die. That's the way you become a dinosaur. So what do you tell a company that asks about the principles they should memorialize in their strategy? What are the 3 or 4 elements of a good, solid environmental sustainability-oriented strategy?
I think the 3 or 4 principles are probably those that we mentioned in the book. So waste prevention, maximizing efficiency and performance, however, reframing performance to include the triple bottom line, or rather expanding it to social and environmental benefits, and so on.
Should compensation be tied to that kind of success?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we discuss in the book as well, is that we say once you start breaking down these silos, you're going to recognize that, of course, you'll have these, positive externalities that you recognize, but also you're going to recognize, more collaboration between departments, and marketing is talking to supply chain, is talking to safer chemicals, which never happened before, and R&D is not just involved in the very, very early stage, in the initial part of your discovery. It's all of a sudden completely embedded in your product development. So this is not a moonshot. This is not far away. I think this is entirely possible. We're getting there.
Wow, business as usual. That's encouraging. And a couple of times you've said we're well along the process, which is great to hear. So how do you also, when you're talking with companies, recommend that they communicate about their commitments and their performance against those commitments? You also said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of progress. Is it okay now to say, look, we're not perfect?
We hear tall claims from chief executive officers, which are important. However, I think it is also important that they, one, back up these claims with actions, and two, acknowledge gaps in the industries. And that is a framing that I think will take the pressure less off of an individual firm or an individual leader to recognize the gaps in an entire industry. To say, the cosmetics industry at large, or the electronics industry at large has an issue with ABC. We, just like our peers, don't have the answer to this yet, and therefore it remains an open item or an unclosed gap in our sustainability report. So this kind of framing, I think, is also inviting collaboration. Another perspective that I'd really like to share is that, being a healthcare professional, I find that this kind of messaging is missing, and I think we need more executives to adopt it, which is every firm is a healthcare firm, and healthcare is a unifying sort of message, and everyone is concerned about their own well-being, about their family's well-being. And so the more we can reframe your footprint into how something is beneficial or not beneficial to the wellness of your consumers or your employees, I think that furthers your intentional action.
So, and getting close to the end here, so I want to bring one last element that we often ask about into that, and that is, how can you engage customers who are the ones who ultimately apply what you do in their lives, whether it's a product or using a service, to be engaged to identify unexpected solutions? It seems to me we don't listen to them enough, and they often have the answer right in hand.
Yeah, I would encourage people to think about all of the inputs or all the things in your day that have stayed the same for the past 100 years or more. I mean, we describe the example of fertilizer in the book, and we talk about how if we could find a way to create fertilizer that did not leverage the Haber-Bosch process and was not as energy intensive, we could also develop a sustainable fuel cell. That would be an unexpected solution, and that would be disruptive to several industries, if not all industries.
So if I'm a consumer buying things, how would you recommend I communicate the opportunity for unexpected solutions to the companies that I spend money with?
I find that from a consumer standpoint, the healthcare messaging is very effective. To say that I'm not comfortable with these levels of lead, or I have, third party tested, or I have read a report that, there are, certain levels of chemicals in my baby food or what have you. This impacts my daily life. This increases my exposure on a daily basis.
So shine a light on what you're concerned about, and the organizations will begin to listen.
Exactly. Yep, I couldn't say it better myself. I would write about it. I would talk about it. I would create a podcast. The role of influencers in marketing today has never been more, and consumers have a greater voice than they ever have. or rather their reach has never been more. And so it is not insignificant for a consumer to voice their concerns, particularly along a healthcare lens.
Well, that is another encouraging message. I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today, Urvashi.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Great to speak with you.
We have been speaking with Urvashi Bhatnagar. She is the co-author of the Sustainability Scorecard, How to Implement and Profit from Unexpected Solutions. Check it out. We'll include a link to that in the article that goes with the podcast. So I think we've heard a lot in this conversation about what the future of a company and the future of an industry needs to look like. That ultimately, sustainability drives longevity in ways that we currently don't think about. We think about preserving the world, but this is also about preserving the viability of a business or a local economy, for that matter. You can't survive if you've got extreme weather and sea level rise drowning your people. But it all comes down to breaking down walls inside a company so that organizations are talking across different business groups about the waste they identify, how to create greater efficiency, and how to be a better part of the community, a community not only of businesses and customers, but the entire environment in which they operate. That is our great opportunity. And if we open the door to wider collaboration across companies and with the customer, we can really identify many ways to move forward. And maybe we'll hand off to the next generations a truly viable economy that's built on a low carbon, no waste approach to providing the things that everyone needs in order to have a prosperous life. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. We're going to be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, I hope you'll take a few minutes to share this podcast and all the others that we've done. There's about 240 of them now. We're available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Audible, amongst many other places that you might be picking up your favorite podcasts. So share this and let's share the ideas so we can create less waste. We'll be back soon. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.